So hi everybody, yeah, Jeff Clark, little design, map design firm in northern Vancouver. And like many of you here, I like to make maps, and like some of you here, I publish maps. Like not many here, I'm venturing into the land of trying to figure out the best way to include indigenous names in maps. It's a tough question, and I still have a lot of open answers. And really, I'm here to talk to you about, what are some of the ways that you do it, have done it, know about doing it. And it's really a complicated question. And like many people said, it's about relationships. So with this one, I'm just going to talk about a new map that I'm working on called the Essential Geography of the Sea to Sky. So we'll just go through quickly where it is, and I'll talk about some maps, like Jake was saying. This is a cartography session, so let's talk maps. Then we'll talk about some of the decisions around the indigenous place names, some of the best practices that I've found and have tried to adopt, and then if time, we'll go through some questions. So the term sea to sky reflects a journey from the coastal waters of Howe Sound, which is just off the west side of Vancouver itself. And it goes through Howe Sound, up through Squamish, and into the resort town of Whistler, and up through there into Pemberton. Now that's you can see Vancouver is that yellow blob of urban mass, and then as you go up sort of central map up towards the top right corner up to Pemberton. So that's the extent of the map that I'm working on. You'll end up going through 4 distinct biogeoclimatic zones, say that 3 times, from a coastal temperate rainforest with Doug fir and hemlock to a much drier ponderosa pine and interior Doug fir climate. That's up in the highlands of Pemberton area. And by the time you're finished, you've done about 85 miles, but you're still within the traditional areas of the Squamish and the Lil'wat First Nations, who have been in this traditional territory since time immemorial. So the classic thing about the sea to sky is it's incredibly scenic. You've got about 85,000 people along the route, sitting on top of about 2.6 million people within the densely populated Metro Vancouver urban area. Tourism, recreation are fundamental to the area. It's well traveled and well played in. But it's still within the traditional territory of 2 very influential First Nations within Canada. We call them First Nations up in Canada. All right, so we've got rivers, we've got mountains, and we've got people. Now, we've got a culturally and ethnically diverse region. There's a blend of urban, rural, indigenous communities along the way. And these are mostly in the form in reservations and dispersed throughout the land as you make your way through the sea to sky area. As I mentioned, tourism and outdoor recreation thrive within the area, just mainly because of its scenic beauty. I'm sure people here have gone skiing up at Whistler or gone climbing. If Sarah Bell's in here, she's like, hands up, Sarah, if you're here. No. Okay, and then also Howe Sound itself is a UNESCO biosphere region, which is, in this case, it means it's unique and diverse ecosystem to be recognized by UNESCO for that designation. So let's just talk a little bit about the why. Number one, it checks off several of the cartography boxes around, having mountains, glaciers, fjords, lakes and rivers. But significantly, it has cultural and historical value. So titling this map that I'm in the process of making, this is a work in progress, by the way. I'm trying to, at the very least, foster geographic awareness, as most people are when they're making maps. But it's also trying to get a better sense of place for the area. And I feel that by including indigenous place names, I aim to acknowledge the deep historical and the cultural connection of indigenous peoples to the land, And we'll talk a bit more about that later as those slides come up. Now, right now, so we'll just talk about the map right now just for a couple of minutes, just because we are at a cartographic conference. So essential geography, that's in the title. And the reason it's in the title is because I'm making these maps based on many conversations I've had with Dave Imus. Many of you would know who Dave Imus is. He's built the essential geography of the United States. So essential geography here in this case refers to stripping down maps down to their essentials and improving the aesthetic and the practical functions of cartography, and believing that clear, focused maps foster a deeper understanding of the landscape. That's the intent. Now, I've used the same approach here, but note to self, when you're making this type of map, distilling content and emphasizing visual clarity and readability is a black box, and it's infinitely iterative. So it's a high-effort map. That's what I call these things. It's a high-effort map. Adding place names to that just makes it infinitely iterative. So in some of these you've seen, let's do this. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so the question here is, this map weaves its way through a traditional land. And I've included on this one, I've included colonial place names. I've also tried to nuance the cultural landscape through indigenous place names. This approach, from my research, I'm seeing that it's becoming more common in professional academic cartography as mapping organizations and institutions adopt policies to respectively incorporate indigenous content. Now, there's many reasons to do so, but in the end, including place names, indigenous place names, we have a chance to contribute to a more inclusive and truthful mapping practice that honors diversity and richness within the world's cultural and historical landscapes. In Canada, we've got something that's been in place since probably the mid-90s, put forward by the First Nations Information Governance Center. It's an NGO that promotes what is called the OCAP principles. These are listed around the drum: ownership, control, access, and possession. And this refers to data sovereignty of cultural knowledge. So ownership is the First Nations own their data. Control is First Nations communities have the right to control all aspects of their data. And access refers to having the right to retain access to their data. Possession clearly is the physical control of data. And these came up from the multiple studies that occurred over time, studying First Nations, reserve systems, people showing up, gathering data. So these protocols came up around that information. But still, making maps, ownership is still a very important factor in this. So what this sounds like is, do you need permission? Yes, that's my approach. So in this sense, we've got consultation. We've heard that a few times today. Consultation, relationship, these are primary within the realm of place names. So do it early, do it often, and it takes time. Be patient. It's very important. So the best practices that are popping up here, key thing is don't assume, reach out, and you have to wait. You be respectful of the process. And many of you here have probably seen Dr. Margaret Pierce's Coming Home map, which is pretty much the gold standard out there. It took her several years to get permissions on the many place names that occurred on that map. Credit and acknowledge. And of course, there's feedback. You're going to get feedback. And try and be respectful of that feedback. Okay, so my approach here with this map, and you're getting a picture of the map itself. Now, it's down in the map gallery. It's under the student section because I didn't get my act together and submit it in time. So I'm the oldest student on the student board. So here's an image. It's it's the work in progress. And if you've been paying attention to the sort of dark magenta print, those are the indigenous place names, the Squamish and the Lil'wat nation names for many of the areas. A lot of those names that are on there were derived from wording and place names that were in the public domain. Along the Scenic Highway, there are, what do you call them, highway signs that have the names on them. They have the names of creeks, they have the names of the little settlements that were there, so historical names, but a culturally significant route. So some of the names that are on here are derived from very public domain sources. All right, so in terms of a form of best practice, because they're, you know, I'm basing this on the OCAP principles that I discussed to you, so this is kind of a realm of best practices being put together here. All right, so you're contacting bands where you can. You describe your project. So this map comes in handy. It's a prototype. And now I had to get it to this point to be a prototype. I can't show up with just an idea. It doesn't work. This allows us to demonstrate a cultural sensitivity around the place name. It helps you visualize the project, its intent, its purpose. It helps build trust. It facilitates feedback, and it supports the OCAP principles. Now, these are popping up as I'm talking, just to give you an idea that there are several steps to take into account when you're going through the process of including or trying to figure out if you can or should. And at some point, you're going to find that, and you've seen that with multiple names for multiple areas, multiple languages. I did a map previously, the Salish Sea map, which had that sometimes, like, what do you put in for the name for Mount Baker? Well, it's a paragraph, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How do you do that? I don't have an answer. Track your references, include your resources, your sources. Dr. Pierce massively referenced along the map a clear, transparent place name source. And you know, at this point, if and when you do connect with an indigenous community, having this proof of concept map will facilitate the process, and that's the important thing, is to facilitate and build the relationship. And like Dr. Pierce, I'm setting out here to create a map that includes enough names to alter the reader's perceptions of the landscape and raise cultural awareness. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. It's a lofty goal. So this work in progress now goes to the next place where I try to set up consultation with the Squamish bands and the excuse me, and the Lil'wat bands. So time will tell, and I think that's the end of it. Hope it helps. It's just a very, very quick overview of the how and why, my approach to doing it. I'm up in Canada. Things might be different down here a bit. In the efforts of, I mean, we use words like reconciliation. I don't know how that's used down here. But this is an attempt at indigenizing a map through reconciliation type process. That's the aim. Thanks for listening. And one last thing before you start clapping. I have two maps. Sorry, Rosemary, you might not get one of these. So I'm going to give away 2 of these maps at the end of the session, right? These are the Salish Sea maps that I was working on previously, so I have some posters done. The other one, you can look at it in the map gallery if you're interested, and you can talk to me. And I'd love to talk to anybody who can inform me more around Indigenous place names. Thank you.
All right, we've got time for a few questions. I see a hand up there in the back. Let me run over.
Can I just say I don't know right now?
Yeah, thanks for that. That was great. I noticed this summer, I'm in Minnesota,
yeah.
And I noticed that in northern Minnesota, they're deploying road signs that have both colonial and indigenous names on it. And I wondered if you knew, this is for rivers, and they're marking the 1854 treaty boundary as well. Do you know of other places, either in the US or Canada, where that's happening?
Yes. Well, it's happening in British Columbia. It's happening in Quebec. It might be in Ontario. I don't know. But in various places within British Columbia, it's happening. On Vancouver Island, it's happening. Even towns are having streets renamed. Something with the statue toppling kind of thing that's going on. So some of the names are being replaced to less offensive names, right? So let's go back to the original traditional name for an area and try and incorporate that into the town. But some place names, like we have a lot of place names in British Columbia that are already the indigenous name, but they've been into the Geographic Board of Names as that name. And again, it's like you were saying, Jake, there might be some weird ex-French, who knows what. So it's like phonetic. But I know that in BC, that is happening more and more. And it happened along this route from the Olympics, was in 2010 up in Whistler. So, big effort to do that. Yes?
Yeah, did you go through this process with the Salish Sea map, just out of curiosity?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so you were working with people here in Washington and in British Columbia?
There's many names in there, and there's many. You can take, for example, Dr. Pierce's map. She had to talk to hundreds and hundreds of people. Mm-hmm. I reached out to as many as I could, and then, like I was doing before, I used very public domain, very basic naming conventions for specific areas. There aren't nearly as many as there are on this name, and I have to reach out to talk to these people.
I guess another question is, if there's I don't know if there's any languages on this current map that, would be what is now termed as sleeping language, no longer dead language, which I really hate that term. I don't know if there's any way you can reach out to people if there's something like that in your...
To do that, I would have to go through, like the Squamish Nation, or I would have to go through other nations who might be from... I don't know about that in this area. The Squamish language is quite strong. Musqueam is quite strong. Lil'wat's quite strong. So there are people who speak the language. They might know about these sleeping languages, but I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. We don't know. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff.